Hi, Maria here. I'm going to show you in my super messy studio how to make an owl ornament made from the clay face I had made. Here's another owl I had. Well, not an owl, it's a fantasy bird, and I think this clay face is also kind of a fantasy bird, though I see an owl. And when I have some, excuse me, when I have leftover clay, when I make epoxy sculpt, I usually make some faces. And they have holes to where I can sew them onto fabric. And I made some just fantasy birds. I don't have any patterns or anything. I just wing it with the idea that I have in my head. So I had seen this fabric that is like almost like feathers, or scales even. I don't know. I liked it. So, but to make the head stand out, I'm using the gray fabric, and I was gonna make, you know how owls have those ears, but the size is a little tricky to figure out because when you fill it up with polyfill, it makes the body much smaller. So I had to try and figure out size here. And then I thought, well, the ears should probably be pointy rather than rounded. And then I have to have a seam allowance. Sewing is not my greatest talent whatsoever. I can sew basic stuff okay, but I can never get it to look perfect. But that's okay. Uh, this is more like a, folk art, scrap fabric idea. I will put it in my Christmas tree when the time comes. If anybody would like to know how I make the clay faces, please leave a comment. I could make some in another video. And then I went to my sewing machine, and here I have sewn all the pieces together. I noticed that I had sewn, super off there. It was not, it would look horrible when I turn it over. So I realized I had to go and fix that. So I did sew a new seam, and here I'm cutting the corners up to the seam to make it turn without being all pulled. Like corners have to be cut so that they don't pull and make it look all bunched up. It's hard to explain. I thought that the body might be too small, but I will have to see. The ears didn't want to turn really well. It looks like it will fit, so I wanted to fill the head partially, just to make it easier to sew the little bib and the head later. Well, the head didn't matter, but the bib I needed to have it somewhat stuffed to get it to fit right. But then I realized I didn't like the bib underneath, so then came the issue, what fabric should I use for it? Just trying some felt. Felt would be a nice texture, but the color didn't look right. So I thought the, the safest thing would be to use the same wavy fabric, and it would tie them better together than having a straight line at the bottom. So I'm using embroidery thread, and if you didn't know, the embroidery thread comes in 6 strands, and I usually, for embroidery like this, where it's just funky seams, I use about 2 strands. Like for embroidery, you would normally use maybe 3 strands, and but 2 strands is quite thick. So I'm just sewing, uh, just, I don't know what you call the stitch. It just attaches the bib to the body. I got off camera here. Sorry about that. And just take some smaller stitches all around. Make sure it's on there straight. And there it's on. And then I fill the rest of the body, and I fill it very tight because I don't know, it looks better when it's very full rather than just, you know, a little bit full. It gives it a lot more body, is sturdy. You can't really overstuff it. I use an old brush. You can see there a painting brush uh, with a hard bristle, and when I couldn't get it in, I would use in the corners, I can use a brush, and it makes the fill really push rather than if you use just a stick, it just slides over the polyfill. So a brush is a good way to use to get everything, all the corners filled. And here I was debating whether to do like a round bottom so it could stand up, but I had already decided to make it a hanging ornament. So if you wanted it to stand up, there would have to be some sort of weight on the bottom or feet. So I just decided to do a simplest thing to just sew across to close the gap there. Again, nothing fancy. I would call this like folk art, where people would make, in the old days, they took some scrap pieces of fabric uh, and just made something. So there she is, tight. And now for the head, that's a little bit tricky because there is no give in the clay, of course. You could use polymer clay, but it's not as strong. And if you have a lot of holes, that would just make it even more fragile. So if you were using polymer clay, I would use maybe 4 holes, one top and one at the bottom, and leave the clay thick to make it hold up for sewing. So I would have 4 holes, like I said, top, bottom, and both sides. This one has a lot of holes around it because it's almost unbreakable clay. And you could use paper clay. The same rule would go for the holes on paper clay. It's even more fragile than polymer clay. So you have to take that into consideration when you make things that you're going to attach to other things. But I find it a good way to use up extra clay with epoxy clay like this. You cannot save it for the next time. You have to use what you make up because it will just harden and become unusable. And then I painted them with acrylic paints. There's that other head, and I did some wire tails for that one. And I'm gonna make some wings too. That's why I compared it to the other birds, but I think those wings were too big. And then the question whether to use same fabric, but I went with blue just as a contrast. The wings you have to cut 2 that are opposite because so when you cut out one set of 2, fabrics, 2 parts like that for one wing, you turn it over so you get the mirror image for the other wing. I just wanted to make something simple. Again, it's hard to picture exactly what it would look like, but I try to see it before it's made. But so here I've filled up both of them, and now I am sewing them shut so that the fill stays inside the wing. I did not put a lot of fill in the wings because they would just stand straight out. So fold in the fabric and you can put in a, a pin to hold hold the fabric together. And here I was gonna I decided to use 2 buttons, 2 white buttons to sew the wings onto the bird. And again, I'm using 2 strands. So the video ends abruptly. I ran out of memory for the camera, so will end abruptly when I put on the second wing. But I have many more videos on different fun things to make. So you can check out my channel. And also you can go to my website, mariagreen.org, to see what else I'm up to. I do write some blogs. So thank you so much for watching.